What if I told you that one of the nicest things you do, trying to make everyone happy, is actually secretly sabotaging your entire life?
Yep, you heard me right. All those years you've spent trying to be liked, trying to get along, trying to just fit in, that might be the one thing that's holding you back. So today, we are diving deep into this pretty radical idea that true freedom, well, it begins the moment you stop trying to please everyone. Okay, so let's just jump right into this. The authors of a book called The Courage to be Disliked, and what a title, right? They put forward this wild idea. Almost every single problem we have comes from one simple thing. We care way too much about what other people think. They argue it's not our past, it's not our traumas that are holding us back, it's this nonstop, nagging need for approval. So what is the real cost of chasing that approval? Well, it is so much higher than you'd ever guess. To really get a grip on the damage this does, we got to look at one of the most powerful analogies in all of psychology. This comes from Carl Rogers, who was a total giant in the field. He painted this picture that, I swear, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. He said, I want you to imagine some potato sprouts in a dark basement. So just picture it. These sad, spindly little sprouts, desperately stretching and reaching for one tiny, tiny sliver of light. They get all pale and weak and just distorted. They're technically alive, sure, but they are not thriving. And Rogers saw this as the perfect metaphor for people who are constantly chasing approval. We twist ourselves into these unnatural shapes, all for a little bit of validation. And in the process, we never become who we were actually meant to be. And that's not just a nice little story. These are the real-world consequences. When your number one goal is to be liked, you're not free. You just aren't. You start living your life according to someone else's playbook. Life turns into this weird zero-sum game for approval points. And suddenly, everyone around you isn't a friend or a peer. They're a rival. The takeaway here is simple and it's brutal. Living for other people's approval will cost you your own life.
But why are we so vulnerable to this? I mean, why is the opinion of some random person so incredibly powerful? To figure that out, we've got to look inside.
So, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, you might have heard of him, he had this absolutely mind-blowing way of looking at the self. He basically said that when you say the word I, you're not talking about some single unified captain of your own ship. Nope, you're talking about a battlefield. He called these warring forces drives. And think about it, this makes so much sense, right? A part of you wants to be healthy, but another part of you really wants that late-night pizza. A part of you wants to be kind and forgiving, but another part is just screaming for revenge after someone wronged you. These drives, they're constantly at war, battling for control. So yeah, we're less like a single person and more like this chaotic jungle inside. Or maybe think of it like a boardroom full of executives, and they're all shouting over each other, trying to get their way. It's madness. And the really big question is, who's actually in charge here? And this is where Nietzsche draws a huge line in the sand between a weak will and a strong will. A person with a weak will is just getting pulled in a million different directions by all these conflicting drives. He called it a conduit for inherited chaos. Love that phrase. They're so easily swayed by other people because there's no strong inner core. But a person with a strong will, what he called a sovereign individual, they've done the hard work. They've organized these drives. They've created a hierarchy. They have an inner center of gravity that lets them act with purpose. They've become a genuine person. So the key insight here, without that strong inner self, you're basically just a puppet, not just for other people, but for your own chaotic impulses. Okay, so if the goal is to build that strong inner center of gravity, how in the world do we actually do it? How do we defend ourselves from the chaos inside and all the pressure from the outside? Well, the answer comes down to one word: boundaries. So what is a boundary, really? The American Psychological Association calls it a psychological demarcation, which is a fancy way of saying it's a line in the sand. It's the set of rules you create for yourself that basically tells the world what you will and will not put up with. It is your personal psychological shield. But here's the thing, not all boundaries are created equal. They exist on a spectrum, right? On one end, you've got boundaries that are way too weak. We call those porous. And on the other end, you've got boundaries that are way too strong or rigid. The goal, the sweet spot, is right there in the middle. That's where we find healthy boundaries.
Okay, so someone with porous boundaries, it's like their house has no front door. Literally, anyone can just wander in and out whenever they feel like it. This is what leads to oversharing, constant people-pleasing, and that feeling of just being totally drained all the time. You feel like you can't say no, so you end up accepting mistreatment just to keep the peace. But a healthy boundary, that's like a door that you control. You have the key. You decide who comes in and when. You're comfortable saying no because you're crystal clear on your own values. Now let's swing to the other extreme, rigid boundaries. This is like a fortress with the drawbridge pulled up and maybe some crocodiles in the moat for good measure. This person avoids vulnerability like the plague. They build walls, they cut people out at the very first sign of a problem. And look, it's usually a defense mechanism, right? It comes from a fear of getting hurt. But again, that healthy boundary is the door you control. It allows you to be vulnerable, but only with people who have earned your trust. It keeps you safe without shutting the whole world out.
All right, so how do you actually do this? It's a pretty simple 3-step process. First, you have to identify what you need. Is it a boundary around your time, your emotions, your physical space? Pinpoint it. Second, you have to communicate it clearly, calmly. Using I statements is absolutely clutch here. So instead of, "You're always bothering me," you say, "I need some quiet time to myself after work." See the difference? And third, and this is the most important part, you have to act. Your behavior has to reinforce your words. Because if you say there's a boundary, but you let people cross it all the time, well then, it's not really a boundary, is it? It's just a suggestion.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, doesn't it? But we all know what happens when you actually try to set a boundary, especially with someone who is very, very used to you not having one.
This right here. This is the moment of truth. This is where that fear kicks in, that little voice in your head. You've stated your needs, you've drawn your line in the sand, and bam, you're met with resistance. So what do you do now?
And let's be real about what that pushback looks like, because you've probably seen it before. People will test your limits. They want to see if you're serious. They might just straight up ignore the boundary. Or they'll question it, try to make you defend it. They might get defensive, give you the silent treatment, maybe even ghost you. These are all super common reactions from people who are benefiting from you having no boundaries. And this right here is why it takes courage.
And this brings us to the big one, the mic drop moment. The core idea that changes absolutely everything. True freedom isn't about getting everyone to like you. True freedom is realizing that some people simply won't like you when you start living for yourself. And that is okay. In fact, it's more than okay. Being disliked isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It is proof, it is evidence that you are finally living by your own values. It is the price of admission for your freedom. And when you finally truly embrace this, the results are, well, they're profound. Setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish. It's the absolute engine of your psychological well-being. It leads to way less stress, better control over your emotions, higher self-esteem, and, ironically, much healthier, more authentic relationships. But only with the people who actually respect you and your boundaries. So, I'm going to leave you with this thought. We spend so much of our lives chasing likes, right? Both online and in real life. But what if we've been playing the wrong game this whole time? What if the real goal isn't to be liked by everyone, but to be respected by the right people, starting with yourself? If this blew your mind, do me a favor and share it with a friend who really needs to hear this. And drop a comment below. What's one boundary you're going to set this week?